and welcome to the Doofcast, the official variety podcast of doofmedia.com. My name is Scott Daly, and this is my paid zombie guide friend, Matt Freeman. Matt, how are you doing?
I am doing exceedingly well, my dearest Scott. Happy to guide you through this wilderness.
So formal.
Well, yes, that's the kind of zombie guide I am.
It's surprising because it's different.
Exactly. It's different.
This week on the show, we are tackling our first patron-produced episode of the new year. Matt, could you maybe explain what that means for people that might be listening to this podcast for the first time, and then say what it is?
Sure thing, Scott. So our Doof Warrior level on Patreon comes with the added perk of the patron getting the opportunity to request a show about whatever they want. So usually people make us watch anime because of our history, but not today.
Yep. No.
Today, Patron DarkGlass has asked us to read the webcomic Unsounded, specifically the first 10 chapters of Unsounded. And yeah.
That's right, Matt. DarkGlass has supported us for a very, very long time. We haven't seen them around the Discord in a bit, though, so I hope they're okay. But it was their turn, and this is what they picked for us. So we're going to talk all about this comic. And then after that, we're going to spend some time talking about the 2019 Oscar nominations that just came out this past week. And then maybe I'll talk about the new M. Night Shyamalan movie for a few minutes to wrap this episode up.
Sounds good.
So let's get right into it. Let's talk about Unsounded.
Okay.
So I guess before we go forward with this, we should say we're going to try to do this conversation non-spoilery. I think we just made that decision because I think we're expecting that at least a significant portion of our audience probably hasn't read this comic, so we don't want to bar them from listening to this episode. Plus, I mean, I think it allows us to just talk about it in broad general terms about to encompass the whole story, because 10 chapters in this story is actually quite a lot. There's only been 13 chapters of this comic released so far, and each chapter is anywhere from 50 to 150 panels. So it's a significant part of the story. Yeah,
well, pages, right? And then the panels. Yeah, so
pages,
it's this was several hours of delightful reading, actually. Yeah, I mean, I agree that we should avoid spoilers because, I'm a fairly online person, and also I'm a person who really likes webcomics. I don't know if it's something I've talked about much, but I've gotten a lot of my entertainment from webcomics over the years, and I've wanted forever actually to do an episode about Achewood, so we'll just a reminder there. But I've never heard of this, and so that suggests that maybe a lot of people haven't heard of it, and so maybe we can give a little sales pitch here without letting on any of the big plot movements.
I think that sounds good. And yeah, I mean, to go back to kind of our history with webcomics in general, this is the second episode we've done on them now. I think the first one was when we did Order of the Stick. Mm-hmm. I think that was almost a year ago now, though. Jeez.
Yeah.
How time flies. But I really don't read very many webcomics. I'm probably repeating myself from some of the stuff I said on that show. But it's been a year, and I don't have memory that lasts that long. So I don't read very many webcomics, so I'd never heard of this at all either. And this is a very different type of story from what Order of the Stick was. The things it's doing, the things it's trying to do, it's very, very different. And I think with Order of the Stick, we kind of got into a place where we weren't sure where to make the cutoff for how much to read. So we probably read too little of that. And I think we maybe overcompensated on this one where we read a whole bunch. But I think the result is we have a really good understanding of what this thing is. And hopefully we'll be able to talk about it in a semi-intelligent kind of way.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about it then.
All right. Do we want to for those that have never read it, do we want to give them a brief overview? I just pulled this thing that this from the About section of the website.
Yeah, let's read that.
All right. Daughter of the Lord of Thieves, Set Frumagim. And okay, these names are complex, and I'm probably going to say them all wrong, so
me too.
Apologies in advance. Set Frumagim is on a mission, and she'll lie, cheat, and steal to make sure it's a success. She'll lie, cheat, and steal anyway. Condemned to aid her in her rotten endeavors is a rotten corpse who seems oddly talented with the supernatural and oddly not laying motionless in the dirt. The road is long and no one is what they seem. Never trust a thief and never trust anyone who won't let you look into their eyes. So that's Unsounded. This is a webcomic created by Ashley Cope. I believe it started. I had this up and now I lost it. It's been quite a few years now, I think. Just because this is a comic that updates Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but Ashley takes like a month off between each completed chapter. So I think chapter 13 completed before the end of the year, and 14 is not going to start up again until February, I think.
Yeah. So I guess, first thing that jumps to mind, like the most obvious thing to talk about to me, if you said that this updates Monday, Wednesday, Friday,
yeah,
it's incredibly gorgeous for something that's being drawn at that rate.
Yeah, it is.
Like the art ranges from, wow, that's really good, to, oh my God, that's gorgeous. That's an amazing piece of art. It's beautiful. It's downright beautiful in places where it's not trying to be beautiful and just kind of depicting something normal. It's extremely competent in terms of conveying like the character movements, emotions, positions, and basically all of the fundamentals of visual storytelling are pretty perfect. That's just kind of the baseline, and then beyond that, she does a lot of innovative things with kind of the framing of it. Like, it appears that most of the time you're just looking at a comic page that looks like it's sort of framed in the window, in the HTML window, as if it's just like a piece of paper.
Yeah.
Stacked on other pieces of paper. But then sometimes, in fact, quite frequently, there will be weird things in the margins, depending on what variety of supernatural things happening in the story at the moment. And that those can get quite creative and disturbing, actually. A little bit breaking the fourth wall, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, I completely agree with you. Yeah, I mean, I just pulled up a page right now that I was flipping through as you were talking. And yeah, there are moments where characters literally break into a panel by ripping the page. There's moments where, they leave that pages and we just get like a black background or a white background when the story kind of goes into a trippy area. It goes into the Kurt, which is like the mystical realm of energy flow. So it does a lot of there's moments in this where she's stuck in like animated GIFs and parts where like the comic actually moves,
right?
Like where things actually move into the panel and out of the panel. Just like, I think, really clever ideas to like take full advantage of the fact that this is a webcomic. This is not just drawing on a piece of paper. You can do other stuff with it, and I think this comic takes full advantage of that, but in a very different kind of way from Order of the Stick, right? I mean, that's kind of the one thing I want to do as we talk through this is compare and contrast these two stories in different ways, because these are both fantasy stories, right? But they are approaching fantasy from very different directions. Order of the Stick is a very meta fourth wall breaking type of story, and while this does literally break the panel at times, it does it for artistic reasons and not really for plot reasons. This is a story that is very focused on building a world and then putting our characters in that world.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, there's the playing around with the frame is usually just to kind of underline what's happening and make it feel creepier. And just kind of play with this idea that like the creator is showing you that they're not limited to working within these panels, that the panels are a convenience. They're not binding. And that I love that. Absolutely love. I love everything about the art. Basically, it's really amazing and inspiring.
I was blown away. I was absolutely blown away. And I mean, if you look at the first few chapters, the first few pages, it does start off relatively simple. I mean, it's always gorgeous, but it starts off simple. And you can tell that this artist has been challenging herself more and more as she goes along. The panels get more complex. She squeezes more into each panel. There's a lot more going on. I mean, it's remarkable. And yeah, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I do not know how they have time to do this. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I'm juxtaposing like the first couple of pages of the comic against the last ones that we read, and it's night and day, really. But that's not to say that the first ones weren't probably well above par for webcomics, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, again, to contrast it with Order of the Stick, which is going for like a basic, not very complex style. And it is really Order of the Stick is relying on the storytelling to really lead your reader through the story. And that's not to say that the storytelling in this is not good, but when I read a comic, because there are so many other ways to tell stories, when I read a comic, the thing I'm paying attention to is the art. And that is the thing that this comic like succeeds at amazingly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you mentioned the story. I think we again, we're not going to spoil, but we can talk in broad outlines about like how we felt about it, I think.
Yeah. There's I mean, so like we said, this is a story set in a fantasy world. It's a completely made up fantasy world. And the way that this world is doled out to us is kind of very slow and deliberate. We start the story zoomed in on our two main characters, which are Set and Dwayne, who actually we don't even learn Dwayne's name until, a few chapters into the story. He's just the plod or the zombie that's following her around because Set's father has ordered them to go across the world to confront her cousin who owes her father money. And that's our inciting incident of the story. And that carries us through really to the end of the part we read. I mean, obviously a lot of stuff happens in between that, but that is really the driving force of our main character through this early part of the book.
Right. So we've got these two main characters who are very different types of character. And I would call them archetypal, but not in a way that feels flat at all. Like they're fascinating and resonant characters. And I want to, I plan on continuing to read this, after this discussion and just
you spoiled my final question.
I am still making up my mind, but no, because like I'm into these characters, and that's kind of the quality. That's kind of the litmus test for me is like, am I into the characters enough that I want to find out what happens to them, because my brain has been convinced that they're real people.
And I think archetypal is fair. I mean, Set is a roguish thief with a tail. That's not the most original design in the world, right? I mean, like she's kind of like a female Zidane from Final Fantasy IX. But I think, and then Dwayne is like mysterious undead man, like with a secret past, right? I mean, that like archetypally, these are very standard characters, but I think the story uses that very well to latch you onto these characters. You immediately kind of understand them on the surface level, and I think that allows you to get through the parts of the story where you don't understand the world yet, because you have a clear picture of the characters before the story starts really piling on world lore. To the point where you wait, what's going on? What is that? Who are these people? They have a whole caste system based on their hair color. Wait, huh? Who? What? But because you have just a good base understanding of who these people are, you can get through that grabbing onto that understanding.
Yeah, and one thing related to that, it really kind of bounces back and forth between kind of lighthearted moments and some really, really heavy stuff. Like the first few chapters, I was pleasantly surprised at like the banter basically between these two main characters. And I was like, oh, that's actually clever and funny, and I'm enjoying this. And like, I don't know, I guess I'm used to it being when you have the young brat character and the old wizard character who are going back and forth. It can be very derivative and played out, but I really liked it. But then later in the story, there's some really dark places the story goes.
Oh yeah, that's an understatement.
Yeah, and everything in between, like there's kind of heart melting, sweet moments and stuff like that, and it's pretty consistent across the board in terms of all that stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, I like that you brought that up, because I think one thing this story really does is manage that tone really well, because it does jump between really, really tough like child murder to a slapstick kind of comic type humor. Like that's our Set character can be very like slapsticky funny. That's kind of one of her big roles throughout the story, and the fact that it can have her be the slapsticky character who also has these like deep-seated insecurities brought on by like stuff that still after chapter 10 we don't even know about her. We don't know. She's got a background that the story has kind of painted for us that is mysterious, and this isn't a spoiler because I don't know the answers to it either, but she can have this kind of deep like traumatic background, but still be rather humorous. And I think Dwayne is that way too. I mean, he's less funny by design because, like you said, he's the wise old mentor wizard guy. But he has some humorous moments too, where I mean, it's very like rolling eyes at the ridiculousness of kids type of humor. But I'm finding myself increasingly more enjoying of that as I get older.
Yeah, yeah, right. They're both very enjoyable in their own ways. And I guess that's one place where the story plays with tone is when we're following different characters, we'll kind of be hewing to a different tone.
Yeah.
So we talked about Set and Dwayne a bit, and rather than talk about all the other characters individually, maybe we can just kind of as an overall just say like there are a lot of characters.
There are a lot of characters.
And it like one of my only negative comments would be like there were times when we would yet again be introducing new characters and I'd be like, I just want to go back to what like the other people I was just reading about were doing. And like, you know, I guess that's fine. Like that happens. That tends to happen in all media, right? Like anytime you break away from something interesting that was happening, you're kind of like, but I was into that thing.
Yeah. And I think a problem with it too is like I ended up enjoying all these side characters, but it took me longer to get there.
Yeah.
I think Seth and Dwayne I understood and liked very quickly, but like Quigley as a character took a while for me to get into. Like Toma as a character, I'm still kind of not sure if I actually find him interesting enough. That when we switch to his sections, I like am anxious to find out what happens.
Right.
But
yeah, and Toma and Elka, I agree. I'm like, I guess Toma, I'm just not sure. Okay, well, yeah, I guess I don't want to get spoilers, but yeah, I kind of agree with you there. That there are some. So yeah, to segue a bit into talking about like the settings and the world building. It's a really cool setting, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
It's a really cool world. But in the same way that sometimes you're like, I don't know if I care about this particular character yet. In the same way, you're like, wait a minute. I was just starting to understand the nature of like how the undead work in this world, and now we're all in this other country, and it's totally different. And are they communist? I'm unclear. And eventually you get it. I think I now could go through all of the countries and be like, yep, this is what's going on with them, and this is the war. They're having a war with this group, and we even like have like it's good enough world building that you can even be like, yeah, and I actually suspect that there's like things going on behind the scenes that we haven't even found out yet. That's like between these two countries, but like I feel like that like table setting has been put in place for future conflicts there, and that's all very good, very solid world building. It's just sometimes you're in this place of like I feel lost and I don't care enough about these characters to feel invested in this exact moment that I'm reading right now.
yeah, that's kind of a weird thing, right? Because I completely agree with you that like sitting here now looking back on the last 10 chapters, I understand this world and I love this world. It's sprawling, it's complex. You have these deep-seated relationships between the peoples of the world and histories within them that we've had, doled out to us in different interesting ways. But I completely agree with you that in the moment, there were many times where I'm not going to lie, I jumped into the wiki a few times. I jumped into the wiki, like, especially with with Alderone, Alderode.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Alderode, which is this pretty complex country in this world that has 2 different religions, like 8 different castes, and those different castes live different ages based off of, like, I guess just like how you're born. It's like a biological thing where some live 300 years, some only live 20. And that's all really complex stuff. And because of the format, it's only, hinted at very subtly in different ways, and it's not always like really clear. So I went to the wiki a few times because I was like, I don't get this. And that's not like ideal. Like for me, like for storytelling and world building, that's not like I don't like in fantasy books where I have to jump back to the glossary or jump back to the map often. Like I don't feel like I should have to do that. I feel like if I want to do that, it's a bonus to give me a better understanding, but I don't feel like I should have to. And I felt like sometimes I did have to.
Yeah, I think it was actually Crease that confused me more than Alderode, but
oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because they have their whole they have no money.
Yeah. Well, there was a lot going on there where I was just like, and there's like two law enforcement factions.
Yeah.
And it took me like far too long to realize that fact, or to care that it was the case. Like I was just like, okay, whatever.
And it ends up being a fairly important plot point.
Exactly. Yeah. Because like basically I was like, this seems, I don't care about this. Like this is, but basically my brain kind of incorrectly pattern matched it to just like, oh, this is just like when like the FBI comes in and they're like, and the police chief is like, this is my jurisdiction, and the FBI kind of like bulls past them. It's like, oh, that's what this is. Like, no, that sort of, but it's more than that. And I kind of, anyway, like none of this is really a flaw with the story. It's just like, it's complicated. And I guess if there was a flaw, it was that I was kind of rushing past things because I wanted to get back to other things, which is partly my fault, at least.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, yes, it is your fault, but if the story makes you feel like you want to do that, then I think that's worth at least bringing up in relation to how effective this story was.
Yeah, right. It's an interesting kind of double-edged thing because what I'm saying is I enjoyed the story enough that I wanted to rush through things to get back to the part that I was enjoying, but also I wanted to rush through things because I didn't find them interesting in the moment. So yeah, but that's these are fairly like advanced criticisms that only really come up when you're already really into something, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I think the point, and you'll probably agree with me on this, the point where I realized that I was actually in love with this story was chapter 7, which is chapter 7 is when we finally get Dwayne's big backstory, what happened to him, why he is the undead person he is. And again, we're not going to spoil it or anything, but it was at this moment that I realized how much I actually cared about this character, because this is basically a 200, almost 150 page diversion away from the main story. The main story doesn't move as we explore the history of this character. And if you hadn't been invested in the character at this point, like, you would have been like, this is meaningless to me. This is just kind of background world building and character building. But I loved that chapter so much, and I really loved Dwayne's backstory. And like, I haven't seen anything that the story has been doing that's like particularly complex yet. Like, I mean, the themes that it's dealing with, the ideas that it's dealing with, like, you know, failure and grief and loyalty and betrayal and all these things are fairly standard fantasy type themes. Like, it's not doing anything super different, but I just think it's doing it well enough to where it's pulling me in. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Interesting. The thing about chapter 7 is like, it's kind of the creator flexing her muscles in a bunch of different ways, because the story to my mind became like very, very focused and clear and dramatic and just good across the board. And also simultaneously the art took like a massive level up somehow. I mean, partially because of the environments that are being depicted, they're just like way more trippy, and partly just, I think that she just got better over time. And so like there's like a particular panel or particular page rather that I like opened as a separate tab just so that I could like look at it later, because it's just so beautiful. But that's
awesome.
Yeah, it's really I would almost say if you're gonna give this a try, then try to get up to, or maybe I guess I would even say try to get up to chapter 7. And if you don't have if you don't care enough to get through chapter 7, once you get up to chapter 7, then I guess it's not for you. But chapter 7 for me was like, oh, like I'm really glad that DarkGlass got us to read this, because that was a joy.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the things I am most afraid of, but most thrilled by when we do these kind of shows is we're jumping into things that we often have very little or no understanding of. We have no idea what we're going to get. We have no idea, how it's going to work out or if it's good. And there's always that feeling where it's like, oh, what if this guy that really likes us and supports us isn't happy, like picks a thing that we hate? That's going to be awkward. And it's very enjoyable for me when I'm reading this thing and I can say to myself, I get it now. I get why they picked this for us.
Yeah.
Because this is a complex, this is the exact type of thing that you and I love so often. It's a complex story with interesting characters, well executed, and it's very pretty.
Yeah. Yeah. It's got a lot going for it.
It's interesting because I just so happened, I didn't set out to do this, but I was just doing my random YouTube video deep dives where I end up watching videos I've seen 5 times before for no reason. But I got onto a video from H Bomber Guy where he's reviewing the Killing Joke cartoon that came out. I think it was last year, maybe the year before. And he's talking kind of about the comics industry in his review of the Killing Joke movie that they made. And he was talking a lot about why the comics of the 80s that were aped so much and then ruined the comics industry that led to this terrible adaptation of the Killing Joke, like why those comics were good and why the things that copied them weren't. And one of the things he was talking about was how those authors and those artists used scenery and scene detail to tell their stories. And going back when I was going through and reading it again today in preparation for the story, that jumped out at me. One of the things Harris mentions is look at the tables, look at the bedside tables and the bookshelves and how they set the table and all the details in the setting about how the characters live and what their priorities are and what they want. And I noticed as I was going through the story how much that was done, how detailed these settings are, how much just the art by itself, removing the words, is conveying things and telling the story to us. And I just, because of that YouTube video, I just happened to have that in my mind as I was reading, and it allowed me to appreciate this artwork that we've already been talking glowingly about for the last 20 minutes or so. Was even better, even more detailed, even more spectacular.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think I remember someone basically that Watchmen specifically, the writer would in the script, it wasn't just what to write in the panels. It was every single panel, it was described exactly what the scene should look like. If there was a desk, what's on the desk, just you said. And because it's all conveying information, right? It's all part of the storytelling. And I agree that this does that really well. Yeah,
it felt to me like Ashley either read that same stuff or just generally agreed with that designing principle, because so much of that is in this comic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. I mean, they're clearly a professional artist, right? So that they probably know all of the tricks.
And that's that's the thing with me, Matt, is I don't like comic books that much. After I've spent all this time talking about this, it's not my favorite, story in gestation medium. I would much rather be reading a book. I'd much rather watch a movie, that kind of thing. So it is difficult for me to really get sucked into a comic. And I'm not going to lie that there were times when I was reading this thing, great artwork aside, there were times when I was reading this thing where I just thought, man, I kind of wish this was a book, because I feel like I would love the hell out of this book if it was a book. But then there were panels like the ones we were talking about that conveyed the story via just the artwork, not just the words on superimposed on the artwork, that really made me appreciate why this is told in its medium.
Yeah. There's definitely some moments where, it'll be a character's pausing for one panel, turning around briefly. You see their expression for a second or whatever, and it's that's wonderful. You're conveying where this character's head is at in a very complex way, potentially using just a panel of their face, and it's great. It happens a lot actually, where information is conveyed through the character's reactions, the way they're drawn. And I kind of like, I kind of, I love books too. And I think comics are one thing where maybe you just have to read a lot of them to kind of learn how to do it or get good at it. Cause like I actually get thrown off to quite a significant degree when the panels are jumbled up in a, like, whenever the horizontal flat lines are broken, I get super confused.
Yeah.
And likewise, when there's a whole bunch of speech bubbles because there's a lot of talking and they're like crisscrossing across panels and they're both side by side and up and down. I don't know what order to read things in. And then I'm pretty badly taken out of the story for that moment where I maybe like read something out of order. And then my brain has to be like, no, start over, and then I have to parse through the conversation again. And I'm like, oh, now, these are moments where I'm reminded that I'm reading a comic book instead of just being in the universe and completely immersed in it. I do wonder if that's something that you get better at when you read more comics. That said, I've read so many web comics in my life. You'd think I'd be good at it by now. So I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I can't be much help to you there because I'm really bad at it. What my brain does, and this is really bad. And I've I spent hours reading this thing and I think I got a little better at it by the end. But what my brain automatically does is it like sees the words and it like zooms in on the words and it stops looking at the pictures. Like that's what my head does. And it's a conscious effort for me to go, okay, hold on. Before you move on to the next panel, finish the words, then look at the picture, Scott. Look at what's happening on the picture. Because a lot of times if I'm just like going, I'll just move on to the next set of words on the next panel and I won't have been paying attention. And, honestly, from a comprehension standpoint, I think like 8 times out of 10, you will still be able to understand what's going on. But there are a lot of times where when I'm doing that and I've kind of just gotten into the zone and stopped like consciously telling myself to pay attention to the panels where I am just like that. I'm like, wait, what, who, huh? And I think that happened in this story more than it does in some of the other comics I've read, just because so much of that story is told via the artwork and it's not just told via the text bubbles. So I got better at it in this specific story because I kind of had to. But I think the reason why it sometimes takes so long to get better at it is because so many comics don't really require you to do that. And it's like it's weird because like. It's not that I'm not appreciating the artwork. It's that I'm treating the artwork and the storytelling as two different things a lot of times when I read. And I like need to train my brain to mesh those things. It's all the same thing. And that's probably why I just don't enjoy comics as much, because I just don't have the experience doing that. Whereas when I'm, just reading words on paper, it's very easy to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind getting a little bit abstract here because I think I do the same thing. And I don't even know if like, here's the thing. As I'm kind of scanning through the text, if you got one of those little eye sensor tracker things that you can get, you'd probably see my eyes like flicking down onto the image to figure out who's talking. Okay, they're situated in the room relative to this other person. Their back is turned and their hand is flung up in a dismissive fashion. So I should be reading this text as like angry and dismissive. And so, like my eyes are flicking around rapidly and picking up context cues very rapidly like that. But I never like finish the page, stop, look at all of the art individually without thinking about what the text is saying.
Yeah.
And try to pick up extra details. I just click onto the next image. And the thing is, if I did stop and scan the page for details, that would definitely throw me out of my like being in the story groove. So I don't know if I can say like, oh yeah, I need to stop, I need to slow down, because like that's kind of like if I said like with every page of a book, I need to stop and then go back over the page and like think about the word choice. Like, nah, after I finish the book, maybe I'll do that, but not while I'm reading the book.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I don't know what the right answer there is, because I agree with you that it's not that I'm completely ignoring the image, is I'm just pulling from the image the exact minimum amount of data I need to understand the point of this text bubble.
Right.
And I'm going, my brain is going no further than that. And I wonder if like, as you like, and this is maybe just an honest question for the audience, right? Like, cause I have not had conversations with people about the correct way to read comics in my life, you know? Like, I don't know if this is how everyone does it or not. Like, no one trains you to read comics, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know how people read comic books.
Yeah, it would be interesting if this is one of those things like how everyone talks about how like they're seeing different things in their head when they read a book.
Right.
People might just be kind of consuming these things very differently.
Yeah, we had that whole conversation about how like what you imagine in your head, and how some people are very, very visual, where they actually like in their mind's eye build a shape that looks like the character, and is that shape in their mind is going through the motions. Whereas I am the type of reader who I just have an emotional, feeling attached to that character, and I'm not actually seeing like a physical description of the character as I read the story. And maybe because I'm that type of book reader, it makes this type of reading, comic book reading, more difficult for me, right? Because I would imagine someone who's very visual in their heads as they're reading a book would have an easier time transitioning to it's a book with pictures on it,
Right. Yeah. I do kind of want to hear what people's feedback is now, because it's very. I've never actually thought about the fact that that there is a particular way in which I'm doing this. It just seems kind of automatic.
Yeah.
But yeah, like right now I'm like looking at one of the pages and kind of just noticing that my eyes are just going everywhere, like not even linearly, like going up and down, and like you'll see something later on the page, and then your eyes go back up to grab like like look for context that might help you understand the thing that's happening lower, but in your brain it all kind of just feels like, oh yeah, I'm just kind of understanding what's happening in the scene.
Yeah. Although I will be completely honest that there were panels and pages in this story that I just didn't understand what was happening.
Yeah.
Where there are points when the action gets really intense and when there's so much going on the page at a time that it just kind of lost me. It lost me to the extent of where I got lost and I stopped my reading and looked back over the panel and just still really couldn't like piece out the series of events that is happening. Like who, what? And there's times when I almost think it's just like the author and the artist kind of like bit off a little more than she could chew and like try to include too much in one very kind of small image, and there's just like too much for me to see and comprehend it, especially in chapter 10 when like it's basically like 80 pages of red, and like it's done for a very specific stylish reason, but the red all starts to like blend into each other where the details of the red you can like can't parse the difference between it.
Yeah.
Obviously, it never broke the story for me, but that is something that I felt.
Yeah, right. It's interesting. I mean, it's interesting that sometimes you don't even need to know exactly what's happening in a certain panel, because your brain can kind of connect the dots between the one before and the one after it, and then you just kind of say, "Well, pretty sure I know what that is based on context."
Right.
But yeah, that's.
But I think the more abstract and outlandish the story gets, the harder it is for you to say, pretty sure I get that by context. And so we're hopping into other planes and having evil squid demons invading a town.
Yeah.
It's tougher to predict the motivations of the evil red squid demon.
True. This is true.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, overall, I really loved this. I'm going to go back to that question I said I was going to ask you at the end of the conversation, which is, which you've already answered, but are you going to keep reading this thing?
Yeah. I'm invested in these characters enough. And it's one of these things where like once a creator has kind of proven to me that they know what they're doing, then I'm just like, oh, okay, now I'm on board. Now I'm just like a fan and I want to know the story and appreciate it in its totality. Sometimes you kind of appreciate something that somebody's trying to do, and then you reach a point where you're just like, all right, that was enough of that. I didn't dislike it, but I'm not like sold on this person as a master of their craft, so I don't feel compelled to move on. This is one where I feel compelled to read more. So yeah, how did you feel about it?
Yeah, I think I'm going to read some more. It's interesting because we talked about this when we talked about Order of the Stick as well, and I said, yeah, I'm definitely going to read more Order of the Stick. Well, it's been a year, Matt, and I haven't done that, like, at all.
Yeah, I haven't either. I mean, I think I could probably talk about why exactly, because like those characters, it was a little bit too meta and self-aware, to the point where you don't quite feel the concerns of the characters. They're all kind of stick figures, if you will.
I see what you did there.
But like, and you know what's funny is I saw some of our patrons talking about it and being like, yeah, if you read farther into that story, and my understanding is that Order of the Stick is incredibly long, actually. But they're saying, like, if you read farther into it, it becomes more serious. Some of these characters become very fleshed out and complicated. And I'm like, you know what? I believe you. But like, I don't know if I'm willing to get into something that's going to take me that many hours before it really kind of starts paying off in that particular way.
I completely agree. And that's kind of why with this, I really do see myself moving on to the next chapter and actually reading it, because unlike that story, I am invested in these characters. Like both of these web comics have mysteries behind them, right? There's some unknown stuff about some of their characters that they've clearly set up. I am much more into what is going on with Set. Like, who is she? Because at the end of chapter 10, you learn some interesting things about her. And we have no context for what it means or where it's going, and I want to figure that out. And I want to know what happens to Dwayne. I want to know if he, accomplishes what he's set out to do. That is stuff I'm into, and part of that, that makes me wonder. And this is probably, like, we can't know the answer to this question for sure, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Like, if DarkGlass had said, read through chapter 5. Would we be having the same conversation right now? And I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I definitely, I think what I said to you when I read chapter 7 was like, chapter 7 totally makes this all worth it. And if I dig into my own word choice there, it's like, well, does that mean it wasn't worth it before chapter 7? And I don't know if I meant that exactly, but definitely like all stories take time to build to something, right? Like, you can't stop after the first chapter of a book and really know if it was going to be good, right? Well, sometimes you can know it was going to be bad, I think. But this one takes its time to get to that place where you're like, oh, okay. Like, I've noticed that I now really care about this. And that for me, that place was around chapter 7, but maybe even a little bit before.
Yeah. And it makes me wonder, like, it makes me feel bad for Order of the Stick, because if I had been forced to read further into that, would I have finished that by now? And I don't know, maybe. But I really don't see myself jumping back to that anytime soon. Maybe when I have free time, whenever that is. But this I feel like I want to make free time for. And this, it's so weird because, like, this is you and I have never heard of it, but I think this is a fairly popular webcomic. So I think this is one of those situations where I think we've stumbled upon a fandom that we didn't know existed until... Like, I didn't know the Worm fandom existed until you brought me into it. And neither of us knew that this fandom existed until we were brought into it. And I think that's cool. Like, I think it's like there's this whole thing that we didn't know about, and now we do.
Yeah, right. I think I like this enough that I'm gonna, try to find, if there's a subreddit or whatever, because there's stuff in it where it's like mysteries, right? And you're like, maybe people are theory crafting about what this is, what this means.
Yeah.
Just something that popped in my head while we're talking just now, is like, if we do catch up, then we'll be like up to date, right? And this is ongoing, right?
Yeah.
So that means that we'll be seeing just individual pages as they come out, and then my experience with being kind of a lifelong consumer of webcomics ever since I was like 14 is when you do get like only one page every couple of days, then you do actually read it in the normal way that we were discussing, but then because that's all you've got, then you go back over it and you look at it and you appreciate the art, and maybe you notice other things you wouldn't have noticed if you were just like binging it like we are.
Yeah, you're absolutely right that it's a whole different way of digesting material.
Yeah. So I, in a sense, I look forward to being caught up so that I don't kind of feel this like I don't know, just the way I'm reading it right now, as if it, just plowing through it. It'll be nice to be able to slow down.
Yeah, I agree. So that is Unsounded. Unless you had anything else to say, I think we can move on from that.
Sounds good.
You can check it out at www.casualvillain.com/unsounded. We'll also put a link in the show notes for that if you guys like what we said about it and want to kind of learn a little bit more. We tried to be as vague as possible because we really don't want to spoil this for you, but I think overall consensus is it's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, check it out.
Yeah. Don't read it at work, though. There are boobies. I learned that the hard way when I turned to a panel and there were some boobies on it.
Yeah. It takes you a long time to get to those boobies, but then they really kind of, whoa, okay.
They just jump out of you.
Yep.
Doof. All right, so that is Unsounded. Let's move on to our next segment of the week. It's Oscar season, Matt. It's one of my favorite times of the year. And the official nominations for the 2019 Academy Awards came out this Tuesday, bright and early at 7:00 in the morning. I think Kumail Nanjiani was one of the two people responsible for reading those, which is just like the worst job ever because you're tired. No one really cares about you because they just want to see what's nominated for what.
Right.
So you have to like try to be entertaining while also being quick to get through the stuff. So rough gig, Kumail. I thought you did a good job I'm talking as if he's listening to this. Okay. But anyway, let's talk about the awards. So we talked about 2018 a lot on our episode a few weeks ago, and we talked about how great of a year it was for movies and the potential, for end of year awards. And then they came out, Matt. And so, I mean, there's always snubs every year, and we're going to talk about them a little bit. But the thing that surprised me the most about this year was in a year that I thought that was so great for movies, how the best picture category is. So here, let me read the best picture nominees for you. So,
all right.
First one we have Black Panther, then we have Black Klansman, that's Spike Lee's film, then Bohemian Rhapsody, then we have The Favorite, Green Book, Roma, A Star Is Born, and Vice. So those are our 8 pictures that are nominated for Best Picture. The rules are you can have at least 5, but at most 10. It's all based on the number of votes the shortlist gets, and this is the 8 we got. So look, there's movies in this list I really like. I really liked Roma. I really liked The Favorite. I thought A Star Is Born was okay. I thought Black Klansman was pretty good. But there's nothing on this list that I'm like, oh my god, this is the best movie. It definitely has to win. And there's movies on this list that I didn't think were very good. Like I just Bohemian Rhapsody I think is a bad movie. I think Vice is not a very good movie either. So it's just like it's not that, and it's not that I care. It's just that huh. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess I care less and less over time, especially as it's sort of more obvious that the way these awards happen is all these backroom dealings and sort of like personal favoritism and advertisements being taken out. Like, so I mean, I should to be honest, I've literally seen one of these. Wow. I've seen one of these movies and like my osmotic understanding of the others is like, I guess I heard that 2 of these are good. I heard that many of these are bad. I don't know what they're doing on this list. I'm just saying that based on like my finger on the pulse kind of sense, but it is a weird list. Like if you had shown me this, you could have very well shown me this and then been like, I was joking, Matt. This is a joke. And I would have been like, I should have known because.
Yeah. I mean, and that's not to say that it's not like a lot of good movies got nominated for stuff. Like the two movies that are leading the nominations this year are The Favorite and Roma, both having 10 nominations. So like those are good movies, and for them to have the most nominations is a good thing. But then yeah, you have weird stuff like here, and like okay, let's talk about Black Panther, because the narrative that I've seen on the internet, especially amongst white people on the internet, is Black Panther, like that deserves to be Best Picture. It's not even the third best Marvel movie of the year. And here's my response to that. I get it. Like I didn't think it was like super great either. However, it made $700 million. It was well reviewed by just about every single critic in the world. The audience gave it an A+ cinema score. Like it is a universally loved movie, and it is an important cultural milestone. And if that's not enough to get a Best Picture nomination, then I don't know what is. Because I think the thing is, we talked about this a few times. When I look back at 2018, one of the big stories from the year I think is going to be is just the sheer amount of people of color making movies speaking to their existence in this country. There were a lot of movies by Black filmmakers talking about what it is like to be Black in America. Some of them are here. Black Klansman was on here. Blind Spotting was a big one. The Hate U Give was a big one. Sorry to Bother You. Even Black Panther is a movie that is about, being Black and American and how that relates to, being African. And that to me is one of the big stories of the year. So Black Panther is part of that story and therefore should be on here for Best Picture.
Yeah, right. I mean, like you said earlier, like, mentioning the other Marvel movies that came out this year, like there's no universe where Infinity War gets a Best Picture nomination.
Right.
As much as I think that that's a brilliant movie that you could actually do like a seminar on and break down like minute like filmmaking choices from script to acting to visual effects, that was never going to happen. So like shouldn't we just be happy that kind of the art that goes into these Marvel movies is being recognized? Because that's one thing where like it's very easy to be like Marvel movies. Like I'm like, no, they're actually great. Like they're really well made. The worst thing you can say about them is they all follow a very similar formula. Yeah. Which by the way was not super closely followed by Infinity War and Black Panther. Played with it enough and kind of moved the pieces around enough that I think you could argue that despite the fact that like virtually everyone had a problem with the third act, I think it was good. Like it deserves recognition, and yeah, like just chill out, everybody. It's the Academy Awards.
I agree. And that's why, like, I am not happy seeing a movie like Green Book on this list. It's the only movie I haven't seen on this list, and it is the only movie I really have no interest in seeing. Everything I've read about this movie does not paint it as the type of movie I want to see. And it is weird that this, like every Black person that I've read writing about this movie paints a picture of this as like a very dated look at racism. This is a movie where a white guy teaches a Black person how to eat fried chicken, and he's teaching him to be more Black and therefore learning how to not be a racist. And it's just like, is that the narrative we want to tell in 2019? I mean, like in 2018 rather, like, is that the story of racism we want to tell? Is like, oh, we solved racism because he ate fried chicken with this Black man. Yay, we did it. Whereas you look at all these other, films talking about racism, and they are brutal, like angry, looks at the state of this country and the state of living in this country after we've quote unquote solved racism. And I just feel like they're better representative of what people are saying, of what the cultural zeitgeist is. So Green Book is one of the favorites for Best Picture because it won a bunch of other awards. So it could win, and that would disappoint me. But, I'm not going to like lose my shit because it's nominated. I'm not going to lose my shit because Bohemian Rhapsody is now. There was a lot of angry people on the internet, and I don't know. It's the Oscars. Like
Yeah.
they're always going to be silly. Crash won an Oscar. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a bad movie.
It's really interesting, kind of, because it's obvious. It's just obvious at this point that the people behind the Academy Awards, they're not picking the best movie of the year.
No,
they're curating like what Hollywood believes it should be enshrined as the touchstone for the cultural zeitgeist of this moment.
Yeah,
and so like it becomes a battle. Like the battle between Black Panther and Green Book isn't which of these is a better film on all of the levels of filmmaking. It's which movie exhibits the politics that Hollywood in 2018 wants to identify itself with.
Yeah,
probably largely for marketing reasons, because I don't even think that's cynical. I think that's just completely obvious at this point.
I think it's always been that way. And
Yeah.
pretending like it hasn't is absurd.
Yeah.
And I mean, one of the things the Academy is doing this year, they've talked about doing it in the past. They are doing it because they want to, because people aren't watching the Oscars anymore, is they are nominating bigger movies. Black Panther is a huge movie. Bohemian Rhapsody is a huge movie. A Star is Born and Vice are big, big movies. There have been complaints in the past years about how the Best Picture race was filled with a bunch of movies that nobody ever saw. So who wants to watch the Oscars when it's 8 movies that nobody saw? So they are making a conscious effort to change that. And that's okay. Like, that's the way the Oscars used to be. It's only really within the last 10 or 15 years that we've really zoomed in on very small indie films as the movies that get nominated for Best Picture. It used to be big movies. So I'm okay with this. And like, yes, my favorite movie of the year is probably never going to win the Oscar for Best Picture. The movie I think is the best movie is probably never going to win the Oscar for Best Picture. That's okay. And I'm glad Black Panther is the first comic book movie nominated for Best Picture, because that's good. That's good. Even if you didn't think it was the best Marvel movie, even if you didn't think it was even that good of a Marvel movie or a movie in general, that's good.
Yeah. I'm fine with all of this.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. It makes me feel like I need to find like what is the actual film award ceremony that is looking for the actual really good movies that came out in a given year that I might not have seen, because I sure can't trust the Academy Awards to be that.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe the Independent Spirit Awards, but even like all the award shows are trying to generate press, right? So it's all politics at the end of the day. It's all politics and money. They run campaigns. It's expensive to win awards.
You know what that means? We've got to
do it.
Start we'll just call it the Objectively Best Film of the Year Awards.
There we go.
Okay, good. I'm on it.
I like what you said about the Best Picture winner being like a snapshot of the cultural zeitgeist in a given year, because that means that the cultural zeitgeist of 2017 was fish fucking. Yep.
And what year did Silence of the Lambs come out? Because that's the 91 zeitgeist was rather disturbed.
I think that just proves our never-ending obsession with serial killers.
That's true.
Apparently,
true.
There's a new Ted Bundy thing on Netflix now that's just like 2 hours of him talking.
Oh, good.
Which I don't know if I ever want to listen to that.
Yeah, I don't need that. I don't need to invite a demon into my living room. Thank you.
So that's the Oscars. Bunch of snubs, things I'm bummed about. First Man didn't get score, which my wife was very upset about, because I don't know if you remember her talking up that score when we were doing the end of the year podcast.
Yeah.
But she was really into that score and was really bummed. I was bummed that 8th Grade didn't get any nominations at all. I think it maybe got one, but it's a bummer. So, but who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah.
Oscars. Pfft.
Yeah, it's okay. We'll give them a nod in the Objectively Best Film Awards.
That's true. 8th Grade, Objectively Best Film.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that. Don't quote me on it. But yeah, that's the Oscars. One more thing that they're doing that I don't like, Matt, they're making it so I don't even want to watch them anymore.
Yeah.
So I think we talked before about how they're taking a lot of the technical awards and they're just going to give them out during commercial breaks.
Oh, yeah.
And not actually show them on the broadcast anymore, which that pisses me off.
Right. Like, I think I care about those more than I care about the big ones, right? Like,
yeah,
because I don't know, like, this is going to be a stuck up thing to say, but like, I feel like actors already get plenty of damn credit in this world.
I don't think that's stuck up to say. Like, I think it's the truth.
Do we need to honor Bradley Cooper more? I think he's plenty well honored. Can we honor the guy who did the makeup on the thing that you didn't even realize was makeup and completely made the movie? Some other. I
completely agree. This is the one moment in these guys' careers that they get to be the center of attention.
Yeah,
and we're taking that away from them. And one of the things that they just announced that they're doing also is normally in a normal year there are five nominees for best song, and they perform each of those 5 songs during the course of the award ceremony. They're not doing that this year. They're picking 2 of them and only performing 2 of them. It's like they're like, okay, we got to make this shorter. How do we do it? And one person's like, what if we remove all the things that people don't like? And they're like, no, we must remove the things that people actually want to see.
Yeah.
Because like all the stupid skits and like, I don't care about that. Like none of those ever work. Like they always do a thing where they're like, oh, let's bring normal people around celebrities, and won't it be so adorable? Like that. when they went, I think it was last year or the year before, where they went into another theater where people were just watching a movie, and like all these stars with normal people in a theater. I was like, take that stuff out. Nobody likes that. Like, don't take the awards out of the award show.
Yeah, that's also cringy, right?
Yeah,
like,
it really is.
And like some years there have been really good hosts that were just a delight, but some years the host has been very, very cringe.
Yeah.
And it's like, don't you want to minimize the impact that the host can have at this point?
Right.
Like just
well, there's no host this year either. So
right.
That's minimized. I don't know what they're gonna do. This is gonna be a very interesting Oscar ceremony.
Oh my God, what is disaster. I can't wait. Yeah. I might watch it just to see how they handle these things.
Yeah. Well, I always watch it, and we'll come here and report on it after the fact. But I think it's at the end of February. I think that's when it is. So look for that within the next month or so.
All right.
But that is the Oscar nominations. All right, one more thing before we wrap up for the day, Matt. I got to talk about my boy. My boy M. Night.
All right.
He had a new movie that came out, and I saw it last weekend, and I got to talk about it.
Tell me about it.
So, Glass. This is tough. This is tough to talk about. I thought about writing a review, and I sat down in front of a screen and stared at a blank page for about 20 minutes and said, I don't know how to talk about this movie. I especially don't know how to talk about this movie in a way that doesn't spoil it. So here we go. Here's my off-the-cuff attempt to do so. So
okay.
I think everyone knows, because the marketing is very clear on this, that Glass is a sequel to the 2001 film Unbreakable and 2017's Split. So it's part of this cinematic universe that M. Night Shyamalan has created, and he's bringing it all together. So David Dunn, played by Bruce Willis, is meeting up with the Horde, played by James McAvoy, and Samuel L. Jackson's Mr. Glass, who was the villain of Unbreakable. This is the most M. Night Shyamalan movie that has ever M. Night Shyamalan, in that it is crazy and weird and wonderful. Like, so you can divide this movie into 3 acts like most movies, and one act feels like the sequel to Unbreakable, the other act feels like a sequel to Split, and then the third act feels like M. Night Shyamalan just saying fuck you to everybody, to the audience, to critics, to comic book movies, to all of it. It is a fascinating dive into who I think is one of our most fascinating directors, and I don't think Glass works in a lot of ways. I think there's a lot of things in the third act that just don't work. They're goofy to the point of where they just like go off the rails, and it just kind of loses you. But it does that in like a fascinating kind of way where you're just like, damn, like he had the balls to do that. And that's why I can't hate it. Like I loved the movie for the parts where I thought it was wonderful, which is, James McAvoy going back to his multiple personality character, who he just did a great job in Split, and he does another wonderful performance here. Bruce Willis like almost cares, like he doesn't quite get to caring again, but it's the closest I've seen him to caring in about 10 years. So that's pretty good. But it's just a wonderful, like, I love M. Night Shyamalan. We've talked about him before. You know, one of our first episodes of Phantom Zone is where we dove into The Happening, which a lot of people declare has one of his worst movies, and is a movie that I love to death precisely because it is so bad. This doesn't get to like The Happening levels of ridiculous, but it is him doing some stuff. And one of the big metaphors of this film is like kind of him considering his entire career and everything that he's done in his entire life, and the place he is right now as a filmmaker. And I can't help but be excited about that place. Like, yes, this movie doesn't work in a lot of ways. Yes, I completely understand why a lot of people out there did not like it. But at the end of the day, it's Shyamalan doing Shyamalan, and that, for me, will always be exciting. And it's going to make a lot of money. It's going to make enough money that he's going to get to do the next film that he wants to do, because this guy's been financing his own movies since The Visit. He spent, I think he took a second mortgage out on his house for The Visit. He took the money he made from The Visit and put it all into Split. And then he took a pretty sizable portion of his Split money and put it into Glass. So he is auteur in, you know, the the truest sense of the word, where he writes, directs, produces everything in these movies.
Wow.
So
I didn't know that he'd leveraged his entire life on this. That's it.
Well, no one would like no one would take his movie. Like he came up with this concept of The Visit, and he shopped it around, and no one would buy it. And then he made the movie with his own money, and then he shopped it around, and no one would buy it. He was like so far into director jail that the key was gone. And he's crawled his way back out of it. And the thing that exhausts me about this thing is every time M. Night Shyamalan has a movie that comes out that people don't like, they're like, the think pieces I see are like, was M. Night Shyamalan really ever that good? And I'm like, yeah, he was really good. And just because he made a bad movie, or a movie you didn't like it's so fascinating to see like this guy, like the whole term for people that like his movies are M. Night Shyamalan apologists. And I hate that, because like, I don't think there's anything to apologize for. Like, yes, he's made some not good movies, but that happens. Like, the guy that made The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable, which are two fucking incredible movies, has nothing to apologize for ever. And I will never apologize for being fascinated by his career.
Right. I mean, for me, yeah, like you can always explain a creator making something bad as just being like, yeah, they messed that one up.
Yeah.
Right. Like, but this is also the guy that made several movies that I really do like.
And when he is bad, he's bad in the most fascinating way.
Yeah.
And I say all of this having not seen The Last Airbender, because it is devastating to my entire argument, so I refuse to watch it.
Yeah, I mean that's one in particular where like you just know that he had no like passion for it and didn't really understand the approach, and then he just kind of had to start making it before he had made it work, right? Like I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel,
think so, because I think he said he made that because his kids wanted him to. So
yeah, and didn't realize that it was destroying his brand.
Yeah.
So I have only one question to ask: is there an equivalent scene to the one where a movie critic is eaten by a monster in Lady in the Water? Or, I mean, because you say it represents his career, and I'm like, that's immediately what I think of is the bit where the movie critic is a douche throughout the movie, and then gets eaten, and then and it's like very clearly like, oh yeah, he hates critics, and he killed a critic in the movie.
He does, and normally that pisses me off, and I'm not a huge fan of it. Like I think it's a little low class to take it out on your critics when your movie doesn't work. I will say yes, but not in as transparent of a way. I mean, it's hard to say it without spoiling it. Okay. The second act of this movie, I can say this. The second act of this movie takes place in a mental institution, and it is a doctor character played by Sarah Paulson trying to convince the superheroes that they are not actually superheroes, that they are just normal people who have convinced themselves that they are great. And you can connect the dots from there about what that might be Shyamalan saying about his career.
Yep, I gotcha. We're on the same page.
Yeah. Okay. So I think it's worth seeing, especially if you like Shyamalan. I think you and I have decided, or maybe I'm deciding that for us right now. And if so, I'm sorry. But I think we've decided that after we finish our Wachowski deep dive, we might loop around and dive into Shyamalan, because I think it would be an infinitely valuable project to do.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think even the ones that have problems are genius in specific ways that are worth talking about.
Yeah, I completely agree. So I think we've got 2 more Wachowski films left, and then we'll dive into that. And hopefully by the time we get to Glass, that'll be out on video, and we can really dive into it.
All right.
But I also guested on a podcast this week. I think it's going to be out the same day this one is, from our old pal Adrian. Runs a podcast called Horrorversary. And he invited me on to talk about Sixth Sense. So I got to talk about Sixth Sense for an hour.
Awesome.
And it was amazing. So
Can't
look
wait.
out for that. But that's all the M. Night Shyamalan talk for this week. We'll be back. Can't wait to talk about The Visit.
Cool. Let's do it.
All right. So that is all we had for you guys this week. If you have any opinions on Unsounded, on the Oscars, on M. Night Shyamalan or Glass, please let us know. You can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or over on Twitter at doofmedia.
Yeah, and if you're not already subscribed to this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
And you can find all the other shows we do and all the other things we do, which is getting to be more and more these days, over at doofmedia.com. If you want to support us, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. Head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and pledge $1 a month or whatever else you can afford to help ensure we keep growing and keep making new content. This episode right here, this talk about Unsounded, only exists because of the wonderful support of our patron DarkGlass. DarkGlass, thank you so much. Thank you for supporting us, and thank you for making us read this webcomic. It was great.
Yeah, it was really a pleasure. We appreciate it. And also, please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcast. Every review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
All right, guys, we'll see you next week when we'll be talking about Cloud Atlas, the next film in the Wachowskis' oeuvre. Such a weird word.
It is.
Oeuvre.
Well,
it never feels like I'm saying it right.
Yeah, I try to just say it as Frenchly as possible.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.